Okay, so we're up to Siman Reish Beis Halacha Tes, Sif Tes. Says the Mechaba, Soifei Anovim she'ein mispashlim la'olam. Soifei Anovim, Rashi, the Mishnah Berurah explains in Sif Kotzim Memches, Hainu Anovim hamnitzoim begefonim b'mos ha'chorif. You have grapes which are on the vines in the winter months, she'ein mispashlim la'olam, va'osin mehem chometz. They never ripen properly, and you make vinegar out of them. So what bracha do you make on these things? And furthermore, v'chein al hanovlos, on novlos, what bracha do you make on that? What are novlos? Says the Mechaba Shem Tamorim, they are dates. Shebishlam usar from hachoim, that the heat cooked and burnt them. For yovshu, they've dried out. On both of those things, mavarich shahakal. You make a shahakal on them, then they haven't got a status properly of fruit. Says in the Mishnah Berurah Memtes, shebishlam usar from hainu, shardei streifas hachoim nispashlim v'nisyapshu v'nishtanu lokilkula. They've deteriorated. And therefore you only make a shahakal on them. Usha'ar mefarshim pirshu, other mefarshim explain the novlos hanu min tamarim she'en mizbashlim alo ilon ve'en nichsharin la'achila. These novlos are dates which do not ripen on a tree, and they're not kosher for achila. They're not suitable for achila. Ela tolshin oison, rather you pick them u'mechamamin oison ba'ofar u'misbashlim. You sort of warm them up. You sort of put them in straw and the earth to help them ripen to some degree. So either way you make a shahakal on them. Why? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Katan Nun, va'achareihem b'rei nefashos rabbis, and afterwards you make a b'rei nefashos. V'loi domi l'sif beis. The obvious problem is that how is this different to Sif beis? Because there we said, Gabi Boy said, afilu lehigia lekepul halovon to mevarchen of ber priadoma. Okay, you don't make a ber praetz, but in its very premature stage, you make a ber priadoma. So why are these fruit different? Well, ma'ishna sofe anovim de mevarchen aleim shahakol. Yeshloima says the Mishnah Berurah, the shani hocha the anovim ma'alyaninhu. They're regular grapes. Ela she'ein nigmar adayin. It's just that they're unripe. They're very premature. Ma'she'ein kein hocha de mekulkalim heim. Here, the problem is not that they're not ready. It's just that they're ruined. They're destroyed. They're only there. Their only function is to make vinegar. They're no better than when water emerges from these fruits. Also, too, these things they're bracha shahakal. They're worse than the other dates because they never ripen on the tree. Okay, so these end of season grapes which stay on the tree and which are very bitter, or novlos which are tamarim, which have sort of been sunburnt, you make a shahakal on those. Okay, yud. Peiros shesharon abishlan b'mayim. Now, very interesting halacha. You have fruit flavored water. So imagine you've got a jug of water, and you see people that it's become quite fashionable now, and you put lemons in, or you put apples or whatever fruit in, and it gives a flavor to the water. What bracha do you make on that water? Is it shahakal, or does it give it the status of ber praetz? So the Mechaba says, Peiros shesharon bishlan b'mayim. You've got water which you soak or you cook in water. You've got fruit, which you soak or cook in water. Even though it might inject some sort of flavor into the water, you make a shahakal on this water. The Rosh, however, says, no, if some of the juice gives a real tam in the actual water, then maybe you make a ber praetz. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah, what do we say la halacha? Peiros shesharon, me'es le'es. That means it's not just you put it in for 5 minutes, but they're properly soaked for 24 hours. The bezer rugina nitein tam b'mayim, because that would normally give a proper taste in the water. You make a shahakal, the Tanakama says, you make a shahakal. The Tanakama, the Mechaba says. Deloi havi ela zeh ba'alma, because it's not really part of the fruit. It's not real lemon or apple or whatever that's going in the water. It's just zeh ba'alma. It's just like some liquid that emerges. And it's not comparable to beet juice. To kulo shalkid mevarchen alei ber priadoma, where we said you make a ber priadoma. Uchadakam b'siman reish hesiv beis mishum da hasum reiv achilas eisen yirakus hu alei shlika. The majority of these fruits is to soak in water and boil them in water, and that's their function. Mash'en kein hacha b'peiros the lav dar chayu lemishlaka lekivshin el lachlam bein. The majority of these fruits apples, lemons, you use them for a specific function, to eat the fruit. So you can't say that pickling them or cooking them gives them the same status. That's its primary function. If this is how the majority of people eat or cook or pickle these things, then indeed you would make a ber pro'etz if that's the normal way of this fruit. That's only if you initially intend to, when you planted them, to eat them either cooked or pressed or pickled. But regular fruit which are eaten normally, there's just that some people dry them and cook them. On the juice that emerges from them, you only make a shahakol. The initial planting of them was to eat them raw, and therefore you make a shahakol. Now, Indian floimin, which he says in the bottom there, shazifim, which are plums, yeveshim karshin, or cherries, kosav hachaya odom, where he says at the bottom, duvdanim, these are cherries. When in countries where you grow a lot of these things, mistoma you intended to dry them, and therefore that could elevate them to a status. The juice could become a ber pro'etz type of juice. Okay, now then the Mechaba brings the Rosh and says that im nichnas tama pri, the Rosh says you make a ber pro'etz. Rotzalema kashetavin umargishin sheyesh tama pri b'mayim amuvashal mashruyin mevarchin ber pro'etz v'lo amrinan she'ena ela tam kolish. You don't say it's just like a weak flavor that's emerged. V'zeh ba'alma k'damrinan b'sifches and in sichitas peres to yes nichnas tama pri b'mayim aladei bishul me'elus minusochat hapri atzma shuchai. Because in a way, the time of the pri will go into the water through cooking rather than through squeezing. Now, what's the halacha? Well, the Indian halacha, pasco achreinim t'lachatchila yivarch shahakol, but b'di'eved im birech be'pra'etz yotza v'ayin b'reish hey sif beis mashashach inyonenu. And therefore, so hayet say midvareinu, that if you have imagine you've got a jug of water and you put in a few pieces of fruit, either it looks nice or you get a bit of a taste, what comes out is you make a shahakol. Unless you've got actual bits of fruit in it, or these fruit were planted for this purpose, you would make a shahakol on it. Okay, let's do Yud Aleph. May shrias tzimukim, raisin wine and things like that. May shrias tzimukim, if you soak raisins or te'enim or figs, or may bishulam, or water which you've cooked these things in them, mavorich alehem shahakol. Again, you make a shahakol for yoytzi gam la rosh. And even according to the rosh, you're yoytze. But the bracha achrona is confusing. Yesh lehistapik in mavorich bar nefashos, or in mavorich bracha achas me'en shalosh kaharosh. What is the after bracha? V'lochein, since there's a suffix, Yerei Shemaim lo yishte ele b'toich hasuda, he should only drink this during a meal, or yechal pri mishivas haminim, or have a glass of wine, for example, v'gam yishte mayim, and also have a shahakol, kadei sheyitztarech levarich bracha achas me'en shalosh bar nefashos. So you can make two brachas, then that way you're covered, and therefore that resolves the suffix. You've covered the suffix. Now, if you've got raisin liquid, let's call it, and you've separated the raisins, then that becomes wine. Then have yayin and mevarich alav b'pragofen. Bracha achas me'en shalosh, and you make an alagefen afterwards. They've got to be that the raisins are a bit sort of moist still. That if you were to press them, there'd be a bit of liquid would emerge. If they're so dry that there's no moisture in them at all, nothing would emerge. Then not. Now this is relevant for Seder night. I know some people can't eat grapes or alcohol in any form or shape, so they make their own raisin wine. I don't know if you ever seen. Yeah. So you put raisins in a container, it becomes strong. Yeah. Okay. So says the Mishnah Berurah. Let's see the detail. Mevarich aleim shahakol. So the Mechaba started off in Yud Aleph and said that if you soak raisins or figs, you make a bracha shahakol. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Nun Daled, Mairi shesheisa hamayim bifnei atzmon. You're not drinking the raisins. You're just drinking the liquid. But if you're drinking the raisins, there you drank just the liquid, right? You don't drink the raisins. Yeah.
There's no raisins in it.
Okay, but there, if you drink the actual fruit, and you're drinking the liquid with it, then because there it's just you're eating fruit, so it's just fruit with a bit of liquid. If, however, your primary kavana, your primary focus is the water, and you initially had some raisins or whatever, figs, and you made a berproids, then you've got a bit of a problem. If you had the raisins or the figs, and you made a berproids, and now you want to have the liquid, do you make a shahakal or not? Because according to the Rosh, we said in the previous sif, you're yaitz already. So the best thing to do is take something else, which is a shahakal, and that way you can make a shahakal on that and have in mind this as well. Okay, yaitz gam la rosh, says the Mishnah Berurah Nun Hey, koi al sif hakoidem, dehevi plukta bezeh. This is going on the previous sif where we had a machleikas between the Rosh and the Machaba. V'ka'amad de lemaisa poshet de nagdin kedei rishona, that we take on that it's poshet like the first opinion that you make a shahakal, the vorach shahakal, to yaitzi bezeh gam ledas harosh, because even the Rosh would agree that would work. To abelav hochel kol advarim mama shahakal yotza, because but the if you made a shahakal you're yaitze. Or bebracha achrona gam ken ein nafkamina b'chol haperes, there is no nafkamina. To bracha achrona shelohen ein ela ber nefashos rabbis, because if it's regular fruit you make a ber nefashos. Aval, but perish shivas minim, the problem is going to occur when you're talking about the fruit of the shivas haminim, kagoin simukim, which are dried grapes, raisins are dried grapes, or te'enim, these are all figs, these are all shivas haminim. Shemevarch dalem brachrina me'ein sholish, you make an ala peris or ala gefen, if it's the liquid or whatever. There we're uncertain how to behave. Because if this water has the status of the fruit, you should make an ala me'ein sholish, you should make an ala gefen on it. Dina pri ba'ala peris. I mean, dina pri ba'atzma in the varach olav ela beri nefashos. Ve'elu ein achas peteres chaverta v'afri b'diavad. And you can't make one over the other. It doesn't work. They don't cover it. So what's the eitzah? Have something b'toich hasuda. Says the Mishnah Berurah involved the birchas hamazon, because if you have it as part of a meal and you wash and you bench, then birchas hamazon peteres bracha shalachrem ben shetia mein shalosh ben shetia beri nefashos rabbis, which we're familiar with that. You can have grapes in the middle of a meal. You can have mazonis in the middle of a meal. Your birchas hamazon will cover all of those things. Okay, now, then the Machaba carried on and said that if moshach hamayim v'ivdilu me'at smukim, you now separate the liquid from the raisins, so then it's now considered raisin juice or some form of wine, and you make a ber pragofen. Says the Mishnah Berurah Nun Zayin Pirush, Hadash ve'lu tzmukim l'te'enim ein eleshoy muravim at smukim marotev. The whole issue previously was you've got just raisins floating around the water. It's just got a status of water still. But when you separate the two, you've got water separate and you've taken the liquid away, then this now has the status of wine. That's how you make the wine. The Magen Avraham says you don't actually have to separate them and put them in like a separate container. And even if you've got the raisins or the figs or whatever it is at the bottom, so long as you're not planning on eating the fruit, you want to just separate the liquid to have a glass of this liquid, of this wine or this alcohol, it's still considered to have the status of wine. You have to actually physically separate the raisins or whatever. Chaim, with figs, what's shlivovitz? Well, that's plums. That's plums. That's what? Yeah, that's also very strong. No, Magen Avraham, mefarshay bekapshuta the dafka b'shemoshach. The Magen Avraham seems to say that dafka you've got to separate them. That's when it has the liquid has the status of wine. And the demar b'shalom nishra adayin gimel yomim. It's just that you haven't let it soak for 3 days. You've got to properly separate them. If you look at 67, I mean, so how long do you soak it for? In other words, if you put raisins in wine in a container and you leave it, at what stage will it become bepragofen? How long and can you make kiddush on it? Right? So if you look at 67, he says, Omnon in Kiddush, Masham Mesimis Tvar Lekamon, Shebeloi Nishta Shlesh Yomim Lemoel Afilu Mashicha. That you've got it's got to be at least 3 days. It's not putting in half an hour before Shabbos. Right? It's got to be there at least 3 days. Or the Indian Resek Hanovim, with regards to squeezing grapes, if you've got, imagine, imagine you get a cool, which I've had in the past from boys who are away in, they're in Spain in a villa or whatever. Rabbi, we forgot the challah, what do we do? That sort of shayla, Erev Shabbos. They've come up with an idea. They haven't got wine, they haven't got grape juice, no other alcohol. Take grapes, squeeze grapes. Is that going to work? So he says here, "Inyan resek avonim hira goner bel yashuv she'ena nechshav liyayin at she'isane samitz mebasa pri." You've got to properly squeeze it, remove all the flesh. In your there, but din maga akum in din of stam yain. Lochein elu hamechinim mitzanovim. Beta they risuk anovim blender. They sort of blend it. You've got to separate the flesh of the fruit from the liquid. And when you've got the pulverized thing, that's not going to be enough. It's got to be properly separated to have the status of wine. Okay, let's just quickly finish off. Nun ches or bracha achas. So we said in that situation you make a bracha achas main shalosh. Hainu ala gefen va priya gefen. V'ayim bachrenim v'afilu le'romi gimel v'osadalet. That means even if you don't put in 3 portions of water and then 4 emerge. Normally the Gemara talks about where you put in 3 lots of water and then the net result is 4. But even if you haven't got that amount, if it's still got liquid, which is wine-like, then you can make a berber gofen. Without soaking it, lachluch is some sort of moisture comes out, and therefore have the status of wine. Okay, so what emerges from today is that when you have water and you put pieces of fruit in it, pretty much you make a shahakal on that. Unless it's a different treatment or you actually have bits of fruit or something like that. Say that.